All right, let's jump into a deep dive today into the Marvel Cinematic Universe,
The MCU.
the MCU. And, we got to talk rankings, right? We're going to be looking at IndieWire's ranking of all 34 Marvel films.
Wow, 34.
34. And, we're not just going to, list them off.
Yeah.
We're going to really try to figure out what makes a Marvel movie great or not so great.
Yeah, what makes it work, what doesn't.
Right. And, I think some interesting things will come up.
Oh, for sure.
Like, did you know that Iron Man, back in 2008,
Oh, yeah.
it was a huge risk?
Absolutely a gamble.
Like, nobody knew.
Back then, yeah.
Yeah, if it was good work. And now look at it. This whole empire. And what's so fascinating to me is how the MCU, it's like this cultural phenomenon.
Oh, it's inescapable,
Yeah.
right? It's everywhere.
It is. You can't ignore it.
You're right. Like, it's part of the conversation.
And I think this article from IndieWire, it points out how it went from this risky underdog to this box office behemoth.
Total dominance.
Yeah. And how that kind of reflects in how the movies themselves have evolved.
Yeah, like you can see the progression.
So let's talk about the ranking a little bit. Black Panther at the top spot.
Number one.
What do you think makes it so groundbreaking?
Well, I mean, the cultural impact is undeniable, but when you look at it, it's the details, like the costumes, inspired by real African tribes. They were beautiful, but they told a story, right? And the world of Wakanda, how they blended that futuristic tech with traditional African elements. I mean, it just created this world that was both fantastical and grounded, and I think it resonated with audiences on so many levels.
That's true. It's just stunning to watch.
Visually stunning.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, we've got Eternals, way down at number 33.
Oof, yeah, way down there.
Some fans I know love the ambition,
Oh, yeah, they went for it.
the scale of it all.
Huge.
But it seems like it just didn't quite land for a lot of people.
It's tricky, right? When you've got a massive cast of characters, this complex backstory spanning centuries.
It's trying to do so much.
So much.
Maybe it lacked that clear focus.
I think so, yeah, and that emotional core that audiences connect with in other MCU films.
Yeah, and this is where it gets interesting. Captain America, the first Avenger, it landed pretty high on the list.
Higher than you might expect.
Yeah, it's a great origin story, don't get me wrong.
Oh, totally.
But I wouldn't have put it up there with these massive team-up films.
Right, like the huge event movies.
Yeah, yeah. What do you make of that?
I think it's easy to overlook the first Avenger amidst all the sequels and crossovers.
You kind of forget about it.
Yeah, it gets lost in the shuffle a little bit, but I think it's ranking points to something crucial about the MCU's success. It's not just about superpowers and explosions. This movie nails Steve Rogers' character, that unwavering morality, the willingness to sacrifice, and that's what makes him the heart of the Avengers. It sets the stage for everything that follows.
And speaking of setting the stage, let's rewind all the way back to the beginning.
Iron Man.
Iron Man. 2008, superhero movies weren't guaranteed hits back then.
No, not at all.
And casting Robert Downey Jr., who, wasn't exactly a safe bet at the time.
Risky move.
What a gamble.
It paid off, though.
Huge gamble.
Huge payoff.
It did. It really did.
Iron Man was a turning point, Remember, superhero movies were often seen as kind of cheesy or overly serious.
Yeah.
But Jon Favreau, the director, he took a different approach, action, sharp humor, and he gave Robert Downey Jr. the freedom to bring his own personality to the role.
Which is perfect for that character.
Perfect, the result. A superhero who felt flawed, relatable, and just incredibly cool.
He owned that role.
He did.
Iron Man really did change the game for superhero movies.
It really did, but the MCU, it kept evolving.
It did. Black Panther. Again, it's not just a superhero movie.
It's a cultural touchstone.
It tapped into something so much deeper and gave us a superhero who looked and sounded different from what we were used to.
Represented something new.
Absolutely. And it explored these complex themes of identity, responsibility.
And it wasn't just the story, right? The music, the visuals, the entire aesthetic created this experience that felt both powerful and celebratory.
And then you have Avengers. Endgame.
The combination of a decade of storytelling.
I mean, did it live up to the hype?
I think it did. It delivered that epic scale, emotional payoff, but it also gave us something more closure. It was like a tribute to the characters, the fans who had been on this journey for so long, and that final battle scene. Pure cinematic magic.
I get chills just thinking about it.
Right.
So we've seen the MCU grow from this risky venture with Iron Man to this cultural phenomenon with Black Panther, and then culminating in the epic scale of Endgame. But not every movie hits the mark right.
Oh, no, for sure.
Eternals, we talked about, it had its issues.
It had some struggles.
Yeah, and I'm really curious to see what other surprises this ranking has in store for us.
It's fascinating, isn't it? The MCU, it's this tapestry of interconnected stories.
I like that, a tapestry.
Yeah.
It's true, even the films that, aren't considered top tier, they still add to the bigger picture.
Yeah. They're all connected. They all matter.
Yeah, and it makes you appreciate the planning that goes into this whole universe.
Oh, absolutely. Years of planning.
Yeah.
I mean, take Guardians of the Galaxy, for example, back in 2014.
Yeah.
A lot of people thought.
What were they thinking?
A weird choice for Marvel.
A talking raccoon?
Yeah, I mean, a tree that only says, I am Groot. It was a gamble.
It was. It paid off big time.
I remember I was skeptical. I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
But then I saw it, and it was like nothing else in the MCU at the time.
It was so different.
So funny and heartfelt.
Yeah.
And that soundtrack.
Oh, the soundtrack was amazing.
Pure gold.
Pure gold.
What do you think made Guardians work so well?
Well, I think James Gunn, the director, he brought this unique style to the MCU.
Yeah.
He embraced the weirdness of it all.
The source material.
Yeah, but he also grounded the characters in these relatable emotions.
Yeah, you cared about this group of misfits.
Even though they were stealing stuff and blowing things up, it's true. And the music.
Genius.
Like, it wasn't just background noise, it was part of the storytelling.
Absolutely.
I bet a lot of people rediscovered some classic 70s and 80s tunes thanks to Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, for sure, me included.
Yeah.
I mean, it added this whole nostalgic layer, but it also helped define the tone, the personalities of the characters.
Yeah.
And I think it showed that the MCU could be more than just straight up action adventure. It could embrace different genres, different styles.
And speaking of different styles, Captain America. The Winter Soldier. That took a darker turn.
It did.
It felt like a 70s political thriller.
Yeah, with that conspiracy plot.
And it had real-world implications.
Yeah, it felt very grounded.
Did you see that as like a significant shift for the MCU?
I think The Winter Soldier definitely raised the stakes.
Yeah.
It showed that the MCU could tackle more complex themes, like government surveillance, the abuse of power, the idea that sometimes the people you trust the most can betray you.
It's dark.
It is, but it still delivered those thrilling action sequences.
Oh, yeah.
And
the Russos, who directed that film, they went on to direct Infinity War and Endgame.
Right, the big ones.
It's interesting how they were able to handle both these like smaller, more character-driven stories and these massive universe-spanning events.
Yeah, they do a great job of balancing that character development with the spectacle, right? They understand that even in a movie with dozens of superheroes, the emotional core has to come from the characters and their relationships.
Okay, I want to talk about a movie that surprised a lot of people.
Okay, which one?
Me included, Thor. Ragnarok.
Oh, yeah.
Taika Waititi, the director.
He's so unique.
He brought this like quirky, almost comedic sensibility to the Thor franchise, which had been pretty serious up to that point.
Yeah, it was a bit of a tonal shift.
What did you make of that?
I mean, Ragnarok was like a breath of fresh air for the Thor franchise.
It was.
It proved that the MCU could poke fun at itself.
Yeah.
Without sacrificing the heart of the story. Totally.
And it leaned into the more fantastical elements of Thor's world.
Yeah, and it was so visually striking.
Oh, absolutely.
That scene where Thor arrives on Sakaar and it's this like crazy, colorful world.
Yeah, unlike anything we'd seen before.
It was like pure imagination on screen.
It really was.
And it worked because it still felt grounded in Thor's emotional journey.
Right, he's dealing with loss, betrayal, the destruction of his homeworld.
Fuzzy stuff.
But the humor, the visual style, it all helped to make those heavy themes more accessible.
Speaking of heavy themes, let's talk about Avengers. Infinity War.
Oh, boy.
That ending with Thanos snapping his fingers and half of all life in the universe disappearing.
I mean, talk about a gut punch.
What do you think made that moment so impactful, even for people who maybe weren't diehard MCU fans?
Well, I think Infinity War subverted expectations. We were used to seeing the heroes win.
Yeah.
But this time, they lost.
They lost big.
They lost big. And it wasn't just a physical loss. It was a loss of hope, a loss of faith in the idea that good always triumphs. Yeah, it left you on this cliffhanger, wondering how they could possibly come back from that.
Masterclass in tension building.
Oh, it was.
Right.
And it showed that the MCU wasn't afraid to take risks, to push the boundaries of what a superhero story could be.
For sure.
So we've seen how the MCU has evolved, experimented with different genres, different tones, while always keeping those core elements of character and heart intact. But there are still a few surprises left on this ranking, right?
Yeah, we've talked about some of the big hits,
The fan favorites.
the fan favorites, but what about the films that maybe don't get as much love?
Yeah, the ones that people kind of forget about.
The overlooked ones. This ranking actually has a few surprises,
Oh, yeah.
where some films land higher than you might expect.
Like what?
Like Iron Man 2, for instance.
Iron Man 2. Okay.
It's often dismissed, as just a bridge to the Avengers.
Yeah, just setting up the team.
It actually did a lot of heavy lifting in terms of world building.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
It introduced Black Widow.
Huge character. Who would become a fan favorite?
Oh, yeah.
And it further explored, Tony Stark's struggles with his legacy and his own mortality.
It had some depth to it.
Yeah, and plus, you can't deny the entertainment value of Mickey Rourke as Whiplash.
Oh, he was so good.
He brought this chaotic energy
It was great.
to the role. It was so fun to watch.
So much fun.
And while Thor, The Dark World, might not be, considered one of the strongest entries,
Not the top of the list.
in the MCU, it introduced the Aether,
Right.
which later became the Reality Stone.
One of the Infinity Stones.
One of the Infinity Stones that
Thanos was after.
Thanos was after.
Yeah, it played a crucial role in setting up Infinity War and Endgame.
It's all connected.
It is.
And it gave us more of Loki,
Oh, Loki. Everybody loves Loki.
who's always a scene stealer.
Always.
His relationship with Thor,
Oh, so good.
that mix of rivalry and affection has always been one of the most compelling dynamics in the MCU.
Absolutely.
And speaking of Loki, his standalone series on Disney Plus delved even deeper into his character.
I loved that series.
It was so good. It explored his motivations, his capacity for both good and evil.
Yeah.
It's a testament to the MCU's ability to expand on these characters and their stories in new and unexpected ways.
They keep finding ways to surprise us.
They do. You mentioned earlier how the MCU embraces different genres.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Ant-Man is a great example of that.
Ant-Man.
It's essentially a heist movie with a superhero twist.
Yeah, how cool is that?
What did you think of that approach?
I thought it was refreshing, and it reminded us that not every hero needs to be a god or a super soldier.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the underdog, the unlikely hero that can make the biggest impact.
I love that.
Yeah.
It had this lighthearted comedic tone
Yeah, it was fun.
that felt different from the other MCU films at the time.
It did, yeah.
And it worked because it didn't shy away from the emotional stakes.
No, it still had heart.
Scott Lang's love for his daughter.
Yeah, that was the core of it.
That was at the heart of the story.
Right.
And that's what made him so relatable.
Absolutely.
Ant-Man proved that you can have humor and heart without sacrificing the action and the excitement that audiences expect from a superhero movie.
You can have it all.
So we've explored the highs and lows of the MCU.
We've been through it all.
We've debated the merits of individual films.
We have.
And we've seen how this interconnected universe has evolved over time. What's the biggest takeaway for you having gone through this ranking?
I think the most important thing to remember is that the MCU, it's more than just a collection of superhero movies. It's a reflection of our culture, our hopes, our fears. These stories resonate with us because they tap into something universal, something that transcends the comic book pages.
It's true. And even though the ranking tries to put these films in some kind of order,
Some kind of hierarchy.
it's ultimately subjective, right?
Oh, absolutely.
What one person considers the best might be another person's least favorite.
Yeah, it's all about personal preference.
And that's the beauty of the MCU.
It is.
There's something for everyone. Whether you prefer the epic scale of Avengers, Endgame, or the quirky humor of Guardians of the Galaxy, there's a film that will speak to you on a personal level.
That's the magic of it.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I have one final question for you listening out there. Thinking about everything we've discussed, which MCU film are you most curious to revisit or perhaps watch for the first time? What sparked your interest? Was it a film you initially dismissed, or one that you think deserves another look with fresh eyes? Let us know, and thanks for joining us on this epic journey through the MCU. Until next time, keep those superhero senses tingling.